Welcome. I'm Debbie Rosas, and you are listening to Get In. This is that time that we get into important, meaningful, and purposeful conversations. Today is a very special episode with Andre Humphrey. Now, I love people that are visionaries and change makers, and he describes himself as that. And I think when you hear about him, you'll get why. He's the founder of Inner, don't you love the word inner? Inner-City Bliss. Right? When I think about connecting to myself and going inside and finding the power within, I think about going into my own inner city. And bliss, who doesn't want bliss? So I love the name. It's a nonprofit organization established in 2018. Now, like me, Andre is a believer that we human beings can create change. And how do we do that? Together, not separately, but together. He ignites change somewhat in kind of the way that I do at NIA with mindfulness, paying attention, gratitude, kindness. Boy, doesn't the world need that, right? Gratitude, kindness, and love to transform the world. If you've done anything and any work about understanding resonance in human beings and the heart, you're going to hear the words compassion, gratitude, love, kindness. Those things change our inner city, inner world of our bodies, minds, emotions, spirit. Now, through inner city bliss, through the work that Andre does, he brings, here's the word, meaningful change to Black and Brown communities that live in inner cities. He does work that I can't do, but he does important work that I wish I could do. So there are people like him that can face to face go in and provide a service that is so needed in our world. He prioritizes the work that he does. He calls it trauma-informed education. Um, we've all had, I imagine, some kind of trauma, but there's something unique about the trauma that Black and Brown communities have experienced. And mindfulness techniques, he brings practices, and here's the big word, learning experiences. How do we grow our brain? With new, novel, and fascinating information. And education should be available to absolutely everyone, particularly education about your body and about your life. So Andre's work touches communities, children, adults, families, schools, corporations, organizations, providing tools for healing and personal growth. And you know, you've heard me say time and time again, you have to have the healing, whether you want to have personal growth or conditioning. The healing, that deep personal work is so important. Andre's journey, which we're going to all hear about, is one of profound transformation. What does that mean to me? When somebody describes their journey as profound transformation, to me, that means they're in it. They live it. They walk their talk. They don't just go to work and do something and they go home and there's something else. This transformation runs deep. Raised by a single mother in a challenging environment marked by abuse, racism, oppression, things that I don't know, I've never had to deal with. Firsthand, the weight of that kind of trauma. And I think sometimes people are even oblivious to the fact that that's trauma, right? That's real, real trauma. His own lived experience and who he is today is unwavering in a dedication, a heart, a body, a mind, a passion dedication to breaking the stigma around mental health and community healing. And it's that together thing that I'm very excited to hear about because this is something that we as humans must be willing to look at what is needed in our community, what kind of healing is needed, and how could we do how can we do something to help? His mission is rooted in putting people first. People first. I call that a student centered experience where the student is the center of the learning. They have to come first. We can have all this education, all this knowledge, but if we can't transmit it in a way that is meaningful and important to people's lives, in a way where they can manage what we're asking them to do, and in a way where they understand what we're asking them to do, then it's just a bunch of information. Andre's passion for building community, inspiring change. It's matched only by his vision for a better future. Wow. And boy, we need to do that. I'm 74 and I have got to hold that vision for the future of my children and all children on the planet. A future of something better. And as Andre said, more loving humanity, kinder, compassionate, empathetic, all those good things, loving. So we're going to dive into the story. I want to hear about his purpose and his mission and all that stuff so that as he's transformed, we might consider how we can transform ourselves and help transform the lives of others. Welcome, Andre. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Debbie. That was a beautiful opening. Feels like my vibration has been lifted just by hearing you talk
Aha,
about it for a few
beautiful.
moments. So thank you for
Well,
that.
how do you describe bliss? All right, you're a man that you've created something called Inner-City Bliss. Did you have blissful experiences as a young child? How how do you describe bliss?
Well, yeah, I did have. That's a great question. I did have experiences of bliss when I was a child, and there was challenges, but just like life, there's contrast. So there's the good and the bad. When I think about bliss in my childhood, it's like birthdays. A lot of it was sports,
Mhm.
uh, playing with my friends, things of that nature. But at that age, I wasn't really conscious of the bliss. I just knew that certain things that I would do, they made me happy and they made me feel good. The idea of bliss really came to me, as an adult, when life got real and, you have jobs and things to do and a lot of things to take care of. I found myself needing to, I guess you could say, manually implement bliss into my life.
Uh-huh.
And one of the ways that, I was able to do that is through meditation. And there was just this feeling that I would get during meditation and after meditation that I guess I could only describe as bliss, or that's the way it came to me. But bliss is, to me, is just a, a feeling that feels good. You know what I mean?
I do. I do.
Yeah.
You know, I well, a couple of words come to mind. One, connection. There's something blissful when I feel that I'm connected to myself and I'm connected to a source.
Yeah.
Now, some
Okay.
kind of source, whatever it is, bigger than me. And for some people, they call it a religion or a practice or whatever. But it's a different kind of connection. And I love how you're just describing it, kind of like when you're a child. These moments of feeling good, having a good time, feeling joyous, and in meditation for me, there's something that I always am reminded that I have the ability to tap into that sensation, that bliss. It's not, you don't have to be special, in other words, to have it. And I kind of get that about your work in really teaching people how special they are and how powerful they are, that the power is within them. Is that is that part of the message of really turning people onto their power?
Yeah. And being able to, turn people in or introducing people on how to discover their power, or I guess you could say take your power back, so to speak.
Yeah.
A lot of people that I work with from marginalized communities, they've gone through things where they've had their power taken away from them. And being able to find your bliss is like rediscovering your happiness, learning how to manually make yourself feel good in a world where um, it doesn't necessarily make people like me or people from communities like me feel good about themselves. When you learn how to do that on your own, then you are definitely taking your power back. So, not necessarily, yeah, it's more about giving them tools so they can take their power back.
Do you, this power that you talk about, that it was taken away, that you're learning to take back, for marginalized communities, does that ever go away? Can it ever go away?
That's a great question, Debbie. And, you know, I ask myself that question every day. And, when I was younger, I would think that, there would come a time when you could move through all of those things and it could just be bliss, or you could just be happy, or like what I like to say, live a normal life. But what is a normal life? Um, but I don't know the answer to that question. And that's why it's important that we give people in marginalized communities tools so that if the case is that you can never quite move through your trauma or your past, at least you can have tools to soothe yourself, to regulate your nervous system, to make life manageable, right? We all deserve to be happy,
Yeah.
on the outside and the inside. So I think it's important that we give people tools so they can accomplish that on their own.
So, providing trauma informed mindfulness based programs, workshops to individuals, it feels to me that the work that you do shines a light on something that somebody may, number one, take for granted. This is just the way I am. I'm always nervous. This is just how life is. It's just a struggle. They don't even know that the experiences that they've had in their life has created trauma to the point where it's affecting their relationships, their physical health. They're not even aware of it. I feel like your work brings knowledge to people and shines a light on that. Do you have do people have aha moments of, "Oh my gosh, Andre, I had no idea that that was trauma."
Yeah, they do. And I did personally, right? Growing up in the inner city and going through some of the things that I went through, I remember, you know, having these intrusive thoughts or negative thoughts and not really knowing what that was, right? And nobody in my family, knew what was going on or attended to those things. And as I got older, you know, the trauma that I experienced in my youth, it was affecting my health, my mental and physical health. It was affecting my relationships. I was affecting my career. It was affecting every aspect of my life. And like you said, I thought, oh, this is just the way it is when you grow up in the inner city. I had no awareness that of the connection between my childhood trauma and what I was experiencing as an adult. And as I started to indulge in these self care modalities and learn about how the mind works and how the emotion works and the impact that they have on the outcome of your life, I was able to turn things around. And now, when I introduce people to these tools, they have these aha moments as well, but a lot of work that we do with the youth is about planting seeds, so as they grow up and they start to face some of these issues, oh, they can remember, hey, I used to meditate and that made me feel good. I remember learning about the benefits of spending time in nature or moving the body. So, yeah, it's about making people become aware. That's what meditation and mindfulness can do is you become aware of the impact of the things that you've been through and you try to change those things so you can live a happy life.
Yeah. Well, that's the kind of stuff that you always hope an educational system will provide to youth, right? The mind, they say, is the one that is the most challenging to harness and control, our mind. And it's true. I mean, I could close my eyes and transport myself into another dimension through my imagination, right? I have the ability to pay attention or not pay attention, as my teachers would say. She's not paying attention, but I was oft imagining and dreaming. Um, and I can imagine that when someone realizes they have the power to control their mind and to use their mind, which is an incredible resource, that those aha moments, you must really, really feel good when you get to witness those aha moments.
Yeah, I think, those are those those moments are the reason why we do what we do. Whenever I can facilitate some concepts to people and they get emotional, they cry, they let me know that they've never seen things this way or never knew that they could do these type of things to make themselves feel better, then, it makes me feel better about some of the things that I've been through because I feel like had I not had to walk that road myself and discover these things for myself, that I would not be able to show people how to take their power back, how to take care of themselves, how to learn to love themselves, how to regulate their nervous system. So, yeah, that's a big reason why I do what I do.
Yeah. So, was there a moment or was there an article that you read or was it a personal experience that you realized that to make a significant impact on people's mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being of people of color, you needed to create an approach that was centered around understanding the community's needs. What do they need? Who are they? Understanding their experience as part of who they are when they show up, and that includes the trauma of systemic inequities, traumas, and stress. Was there a moment when you went, I've got to do this? I've got to really focus on the mental health?
I mean, yes and no. It was kind of like just a journey in itself. Just growing up in the inner city, experiencing the trauma that I experienced, having the mental and emotional issues, and everybody around me kind of going through the same thing. I was always aware of the struggles in the inner city, and I had been on my own healing journey for probably about 10 years through meditation and mindfulness. But I did have an aha moment the first time I did yoga. I
Ah,
always thought that yoga was for like, suburban white women or like people from India. In my
right.
community, especially in the inner city, nobody does yoga. We considered it as a workout. And if I'm gonna work out, then I'll go to the gym and lift some weights. But my first time doing yoga, I finished and I probably hadn't stretched since college. And I remember laying down in corpse posture and I just felt that bliss
Yeah,
that we talk about. My body felt good. And whatever the nervous system is, I felt that being regulated.
yeah,
And I heard a voice. I don't know if it was my voice or something outside of me, but it was like, oh, people from the inner city need this yoga. and this meditation and this mindfulness, especially people from the inner city because of all the trauma that they've been through. And right after I heard that voice, uh, a voice said inner city bliss.
Wow.
And yeah, I went to work the next day. I created a logo, which is similar to what we have right now. And I've been working on bringing these tools that I've learned to people from marginalized communities ever since. So yeah, I guess that was a aha moment.
Did you have a favorite meditation or yoga teacher?
You know, the funny thing is I've never really had a spiritual mentor.
Okay. Well,
Um,
you've got one, I'm telling you. You got the best
Right.
one.
No, no, no. I mean, like in the physical sense, a lot of
Gotcha.
people say, who taught, all my mentors were people online. I'm like a self-taught person.
Self-taught, right?
But Deepak Chopra
Mhm.
was one of my, he was the first person to kind of open the way to deepening my meditation practice. And Thich
Beautiful.
Nhat Hanh is like one of my mentors. So yes, I have mentors, but I've never actually met these people in person. And I'm thankful for technology and
Yes.
the way that we can tap in with people who we've never met. But yeah, I would say Deepak Chopra, Thich Nhat Hanh
Uh-huh.
were my main two mindfulness practitioners that I follow.
Well, I think for a visionary, it's such a great environment to put yourself in where you're just hearing your voice. You have guides, you have other people that are pointing you in a certain direction, but you're really listening to that inner bliss. You're listening to that voice inside of you. That's that power, right? As
Yeah.
fantastic as both of those people are, they're waking you up to the power that's in you. They're showing
Amen.
you a way. They're giving you a word or a technique, but then it's you that's doing the work, right? You
Yes.
have to go and take a bite.
Mhm.
And that is the that is what it takes, really, to follow the voice. I too had the same kind of experience. I heard a voice say, "You're gonna create a program. You're not gonna need any machines, and it's gonna be a program for people to feel better." I'm like, "You're talking to me? You know, I even exercise. What are you talking about?" Right? So,
Right.
following those kinds of voices, I really, really believe is important. And along the way, I bet you've been tested. So here you
Uh,
have that bliss,
yeah.
and you create the logo, and you're on your path.
Mhm.
What are some of the tests that you think the universe has put you through?
The tests have been going since I've gotten on this earth, and they're still going now. But just speaking particularly of the nonprofit world, is that, you know, I only listen to spirit as far as following this path. So when I heard inner city bliss, I heard people from marginalized communities needed these modalities.
Mhm,
I also heard nonprofit
mhm.
because I knew that people in the inner city wouldn't value meditation, mindfulness, mental health,
Mhm.
right? I knew that if I created a for-profit entity, I would probably only be working with upper scale Black and Brown people, which
Absolutely.
I'm okay with that, but that's not where my heart is. My heart is for the people who are in the ghettos, the inner city. Um, so I heard Spirit say nonprofit because I knew that with the nonprofit, I could raise money
Mhm.
and offer these programs for free or low cost where I could work with the people that I wanted to work with. And every day I questioned, was that the right voice? Was nonprofit the right way? Because I have a extensive amount of experience in meditation and mindfulness and self-healing, but I didn't know anything about a nonprofit. I'm
Right.
talking about nothing. And from that day, I just started self educating and I was able to figure it out. But you know, I was probably 2 years into running my nonprofit before I realized as an executive director, my number one job was to fundraise, not
Right.
not be in the community
And
touching
not
people.
funrise, Fun people, fund money, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I was like 2 years in when I realized, oh, I need to be fundraising and I need to be having all these board meetings and doing all these things that necessarily I didn't hear spirit say any of that
He did
stuff.
say, yeah.
But yeah, so it's been a challenge learning how to self-educating on how to run a nonprofit, but I've done it. And we build an organization that brings in revenue and brings in contracts. So that was a challenge. But the biggest challenge is once I got the nonprofit up and running to kind of like a mom and pop shop, so to speak, I have this desire to take it to the next level, which means creating an organization that can sustain and run itself even if Andre goes away.
Yeah,
And that
yeah,
means I have to be better at fundraising, fundraising, fundraising. And we've gotten better at it, but it's been a challenge to build a sustainable organization.
yeah,
I don't know if you're aware of this, but I think 30% of Black owned nonprofits make less than 30,000 a year. And what you see is these same systemic issues that you see in regular life, you kind of see in the nonprofit industry.
wow,
If you want to secure those bigger grants that can help you sustain and create an organization that can run without me, I don't want to say there's gatekeepers, but there's people
mhm,
who have to let you in. And that's been a challenge. So for the last 6 years, we've been just trying to build our reputation in the community as an organization that's for the people and cares about the people. And my only hope is that somebody one day will see the beautiful work that we're doing and want to help us grow and expand the mission. But the biggest challenge is just been learning how to build and run a sustainable organization.
yeah. Well, and that that's a trick, sustaining a body of anything, a human body, a healthy body, sustaining a healthy business. There's the business and then there's your passion for wanting to serve people.
Yeah.
And they're very different hats.
Mhm.
Serving the business requires making very, very different decisions and choices, right? And then serving the people, it's like, oh God, yeah, that's where I want to be, right? This is
Exactly.
where I do my best work, right? And it's tough to wear both of those hats. Did you have a defining moment that shifted your perspective of who you were, where you said, I'm supposed to serve people?
I would say that that defining moment came when I was very young. I mean, I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Bible Belt of the United States of America.
Yeah.
And my mother was very religious, a very powerful praying woman. And I don't know, just going to church and hearing the story about Jesus every Christmas. I just remember being young and being like, "Hey, I wanna do that, like, I wanna help people," and that was when the first seeds were planted, but I think all my life just very empathetic, caring about people, feeling other people's feelings, so I can't say that there was a magic moment that I knew that I wanted to serve. I think not to get too spiritual,
Mhm.
I feel like I made that decision before I came into this body
Yeah.
that I was going to live a life of service because I've always been called to the Jesus, uh, Martin Luther King,
Mhm. Mhm.
people who were making an impact in changing society. those were the people that I were drawn to, and I would be like, "Oh, I wanna be like them," you know?
I relate totally. I've always felt like that as a little girl. Wanted wanted to be a doctor, but I knew I didn't have the mental capacity to do that. And I
Right.
read the book Florence Nightingale, and I thought, okay, well, I'll do that. I'll become a nurse on the battlefield.
Mm,
And so I think, as you say, those seeds that are planted in our hearts and in our minds, as children, they show up and they sprout at different times. And I find it fun to go back and look at what was that
mm.
little seed. Do you have a favorite technique? You talk about trauma informed mindfulness as a holistic way to approach mental health based on the fact that the mind and body interconnected, but when one is healed, the other one follows. Do you have a favorite technique that you brought into your program and you say, everybody's going to learn this?
Well, it depends on whether I'm working with adults or children.
Okay.
And with adults, I do have an exercise. It's called the breath of fire, which is kind of related to Kundalini yoga.
Hmm.
And it's been one of the most powerful regulating exercises that I could ever do, no matter how bad a shape I'm in mentally or emotionally. If I do 3 minutes of breath of fire, take 2 minutes to observe my breathing and notice how I feel, I can experience a shift just like that.
Yeah.
So for adults, yes, my breath of fire breathing exercise is my go to. For the youth, it's a very simple exercise that doesn't take a lot of time, and it's called 3 mindful breaths. And the reason why this exercise is so impactful for the youth and for adults as well, is that a lot of people think that they can't meditate or they think that they have to meditate for an hour or for years to receive the benefits of meditation and mindfulness. But with the 3 mindful breaths, I show people that they can shift their energy, they can shift how they feel, and just taking a moment to close their eyes, go inside themselves, take 3 mindful breaths, and then notice how they feel, and the shift is there. So for adults, I love to do the 3 mindful breaths and the breath of fire. For the youth, it's showing them that they can make themselves feel better just by taking a few moments to go within and focus on their breath.
Yeah. Well, that breath, right? It's that one life force that we all share. And it's the one thing that so beautifully changes our brain chemistry. And as you pointed out, in such a short period of time, we can make a difference in how we feel. That's personal empowerment to know that you have the tool, you can do this, you don't need a teacher, you can do it anytime, anywhere. And then I love how you're giving people the tool, but also the opportunity to self reflect. What did that tool do? How do you
Mhm.
feel now? That's that intrinsic motivation that you build in people so that they say, oh, that's why I'm going to do that because I want to feel that again. That regulation, the ability to take control of what's going on in one's life, calm the nervous system is so, so beautiful. I love that. That's a great, great tool and great technique for everybody. Um, you talk about having various different initiatives, different ways to cultivate inner peace, resilience, and empowerment. Can you share some different initiatives? I know you have things that are in nature. I know you have things online and you have things in person.
Yeah, we do have several initiatives, and the reason for that is because we reckon, or at least I recognize, that everybody's not going to be called to the same thing. Everybody's not going to want to meditate. Everybody's not going to want to dance. Everybody's not going to want to spend time in nature. So if we have more of a selection, then hopefully we can get people to come in and at least start prioritizing some sort of self-care. But the main initiative, or at least what I would like to think is our focus initiative, because it's my focus initiative, is meditation and mindfulness, giving people tools so they can learn how to deal with their mind and their emotions. Like you said, you go to school for forever and you never take a class on your mind and your emotions. And I think it's very important that we emphasize how important it is to learn how to deal with your mind and your emotions the same way you learn how to do math or learn science. Um, so, meditation and mindfulness, we offer a mindfulness based stress reduction offering. So, not only are we teaching people about meditation and mindfulness, we're teaching them stress reduction techniques, which is very important in today's world. Then we have movement, which, about a year and a half ago, I met a young lady named Stephanie, who is our director of movement now, and she introduced me to a beautiful offering called Nia. And I thought it was just a way to dance. And the kids used to look like they were having so much fun when they're doing it. But then I started to do it. And I remember the first time doing Nia, I realized that there was something spiritual there, the same bliss that I get when I do the meditation and the mindfulness, I was getting it doing Nia. So we brought her in, and we've been offering the Nia dance movements to the youth in the inner city, and it's been going great. So we offer the movement. We have our movement initiative, and then we offer the nature based programs. So, in a perfect world, we would like to help people reconnect to themselves, to each other, and to the natural world.
Yeah.
And when we combine all three of those initiatives together, that's kind of what we get. We have people learning tools so they can deal with themselves better, so they can deal with each other better. We have people moving their body, and they're doing it in nature and feeling the bliss that comes from that. So, those are our main focal points as far as our initiatives: mindfulness, movement, and nature based programs.
Beautiful. And you use this word, self care, right? I think most people understand mindfulness. Yeah, that's going to give me, that's some kind of self care. It's going to help me calm down, right? Movement, yes, I know everybody says you should move, right? But being in nature, I don't, I think a lot of us underestimate the healing power, the calming benefit to the nervous system of just taking off your shoes and putting your feet in the dirt, right?
And amen. Yes,
And
indeed.
just being out in nature in itself integrates that mindfulness, the movement in nature into a blissful uh, experience that can create such a beautiful positive change. When you first introduced the idea of self care practices, did people look at you like, who has time for self care? Right? Who has time for self care? I'm working and I've got to take care of my family and I'm a mother of four, and whatever.
You know, I don't think I've ever received any resistance to the idea of self care. And
Excellent.
here's why: Inner City Bliss was created during the pandemic. Okay. So, if there was ever a time to birth the idea of self care, then that was it. Everybody was scared, worried about their health, worried about whether they were going to live or not. So I never had to convince anybody to engage in self care. People were seeking out ways to engage in self care.
Mhm.
So, no, I don't think I've ever had to convince people. But what I do like to communicate to people around self-care is it's not a one size fits all thing. It doesn't have to be something spiritual or up in the clouds like meditation and mindfulness.
Right.
It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a dancer to do self care. You don't even have to spend time in nature. Self care is accessible to the individual based on your needs. And when we teach self care, it's about doing things that are positive, that make you feel good.
Yeah.
So for somebody, it may just be reading a book. For me, it might be playing my flute. For somebody else, it might be riding a bike. So I encourage people to find out what it is that you like to do that makes you feel good, and then build your self care routine around that. So it's
Yeah.
not me forcing people into a rigid idea of you have to sit down and meditate every day. It's about
Exactly.
discovering what works for you and doing more of that. And I think ultimately, deep down inside, all humans want to feel good. And in order to feel good, you got to learn to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Before you can take care of others, you got to learn to take care of yourself. So self care is just really important. And I've never received any pushback on the idea of taking care of yourself.
There's something, first of all, I play the flute as well, so we should do a duet.
Okay. I'm gonna
um,
have to hear more about that.
I'm not, it's been a long time since I played, so, probably
Mm.
wouldn't be very good. But what I love that you are talking about in terms of self care, um, I believe for marginalized communities, there's a level of commitment and strength and desire that I think has come from suffering, not from the pleasure principle, for example, but this resiliency to take care of oneself. So, um, as a white woman, I can say that my idea of self care has come from a very different environment than I think the kind of self care that is emerging, that is coming through for people, um, Black and brown and marginalized communities. Do you think that's true, or am I just making up a story here?
You know, I would say that it is different, but I don't know because it's like in a human body, suffering is present, right? We all, you know, get old, we all get sick, we all lose things, we're all going to eventually die. So I think the need for self care is important for all beings, especially for those who've been through some things. So just because you're white doesn't mean you haven't been through trauma, right?
Absolutely, right.
So it's about being aware of your story and what you need, not based on what color you are or what community you grow up in. You need to be able to have the self awareness to understand what you've been through and then develop a self care routine around that. There are some Black people that don't need a lot of self care.
Yeah.
They've been, they've had a fairly decent life and haven't experienced a lot of trauma. Then there's white people who have been through more abuse than I have or anybody that I know, right? So it's really about you understanding yourself, your story, and developing a self care routine that once again fits you.
I love that that fits with, I was gonna ask you a question of, what is culturally competent perspective, but what you have just shared is a culturally humanistic perspective, that you're right, it doesn't, pain doesn't matter with the color of your skin, but those lived experiences that people go through. Is one less or more? Well, to understand your trauma and then understand what you need, and then to provide personal self care That's the perfect recipe that you're talking about. I love that. So, what is a culturally competent perspective?
Well, you gotta learn about the culture, right? So if I'm if I want to bring culturally responsive self-care modalities to the inner city, then I need to have a deep understanding of how the inner city works. I got to have a deep understanding of the systemic issues that affect the people. Because here's the thing, if you just look at the inner city and the people in the inner city, you'll be like, oh, those are some terrible people. They just can't get it together,
Yeah.
right? But when you develop cultural, when you develop that aspect, it's like, oh no, there's there's systemic oppression, right? There's racism, there's a lack, there's drugs in the community, there's guns in the community, there's violence in the communities. All these things didn't, a lot of these things, some of these things existed 60 years ago, and some of these things didn't.
Mhm.
So if you look at the landscape of the inner city, you'll see that these aren't bad people, they are going through a lot. And to be culturally responsive is to understand the culture, what they've gone through, and create modalities that meet them where they are.
Yeah. Meeting them where they are, that is so, such an important tool. An awareness, give you his word awareness, such an important awareness. Can I meet people where they are? Can I create a sense of safety and belonging through understanding, and not just, "Oh, yeah, I get it." I can remember saying to somebody who had, came and she said, "Oh, I've just gotten divorced." And I put my hand on her and I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I said, I understand." No, I didn't. I hadn't been divorced. I hadn't done the homework. I didn't really understand. It was just coming out of my mouth. And then I got divorced, and I remembered going through that experience, um, you know, as you say, going through the research, the cultural research, the culture of divorce, what's it mean? And getting a physical, visceral perspective through sensation on what is that all about. The next time somebody came to me and said, I just got divorced, and I looked them in the eye, it was like, I get it. There's that meeting place. So I can see how important that is to meet people where they are, and also to
Yeah.
understand, to have a visceral understanding of what did they go through, not just look at it from the outside, but from the inside out, inner, right? Inner.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
important to be able to look at people from a cultural lens of what they've been through, also from a personal lens, from a trauma informed lens. And when you look at people from a trauma informed lens, one of the sayings is the problem is rarely the problem. So when you run into people who have issues that come up, if you can look at them from a trauma informed lens, you can look past the bad behavior and realize, oh, this person was neglected as a child. This person never had their mother and their father in their life. Oh, this person, parents were in prison their whole entire life. And then you can hold space for some of those things that come up while providing them tools so they can develop their awareness to move through those things. But if you lack the cultural awareness or the trauma informed awareness, then you may say, oh, this is a bad person and
Right.
cast them off. And I don't believe any humans want to be bad.
No.
A lot of us are products of our environment
Mm.
and don't have the tools to process some of the things that we've been through. So we want to create a space where everybody has an opportunity to heal and do better and be happy.
Well, that the role model, as you say, is so important. Show me another vision. Show me another way. Show me another path. Um, And you talk about, healing, and healing being such an important aspect of the change. Um, what keeps you inspired and on a path of healing and on a path to keeping inner city bliss, alive in today's world, that can feel pretty heavy.
I would say, I guess the heaviness that I feel inside personally. It's my anchor, and it keeps me trying to figure out ways that I can bring more wellness, more self care, more happiness into my own life. And then, yeah, I've kind of built my career around teaching people the things that I've learned. But I think the catalyst for all of this is my own suffering, which I don't know how to
Mhm.
feel about saying that.
Now, people say, Debbie, what is your purpose in the planet? And I say, my purpose is to inspire people to feel to heal. Because I don't think that if we can't go into that place to feel the good, the bad, the ugly, the pain, right, and the joy, if we can't feel, then we can't address what needs to be addressed. And you know, I love your answer, your willingness to constantly feel what is inside that's the oyster, that's the sand in the oyster shell that's moving you forward. I guess that's that struggle that I was talking about that um, I've had struggles, yes, but I haven't had that kind of struggle that a Black and a brown and marginalized community goes through. So I don't, I can't have the conversation. I can have empathy and I can say I understand, but I don't. I've never lived it, right? Um, but the healing, keeping ourselves inspired to help humanity, to serve others is such an important aspect of life today. And particularly in the US where so much funding is being cut and the resources to help people is somehow now not being valued is pretty frightening to me. And yeah, it's frightening.
No, I agree with that. Sometimes it feels like we live in a backwards world where the things that should make sense don't make sense, and the things that don't make sense are the things that's prioritized. But that's why it's so important for people like me and you to continue to do our own personal work so we can continue to visualize a better future and create these entities or these bodies of movement that can bring more healing, more self care, more love, more gratitude, more compassion, more mindfulness into the world. We're needed more than ever. So hopefully we can continue to nurture ourselves so we can continue to show up and support the people who need to be supported.
Yeah. It's taking that self care, and it feels so good that you want somebody else to have it. I want she's having kind of thing, right? That's a wonderful lesson, um, an unexpected lesson. I would imagine that a lot of people get through you, and they don't even know it. That it's changed their lives. It's made them feel so good, and they want to help somebody else in their community or somebody else in their family, and they pass it on. Or they invite them in. Um, I know you do partnering, and I was reading about youth uprising, and inner city bliss partnering. What does that look like? How does that work?
Well, basically, Youth Uprising was they were the first organization that I brought programming to when I first started this journey. And my mindfulness program, my meditation program was on paper. I used to go in with a piece of paper and teach. And Youth Uprising actually gave us our first contract. So shout out to Youth Uprising. But basically, it's just me reaching out to people saying, "Hey, I got these programs that I think that I know would be beneficial to your youth." Um, I believe the change that we're seeking in the inner city is through meditation, mindfulness, becoming aware of our behavior, right? Um, so it's really just a matter of me reaching out and champion my programs, trying to see if they'll let me get in front of their kids or their staff so I can promote these modalities to the community. So, yeah,
Beautiful.
it's not really any magic to that, just trying to get the word out and get in front of whoever I can to teach these to or to teach these modalities and give these tools away.
Here's my last question. Tell me about the importance of intergenerational bonds and how do you make that happen?
Well, how we do it at Inner City Bliss is we try to have family events. Okay, so we want to try to get the entire family outdoors to do nature, to dance, to eat healthy food. And just from my experience, you're going to have what's the word? I don't want to say successful, but integrating these tools into a family are going to be more successful if the grandma and the mama and the daddy and the kids, everybody's
Yeah,
involved,
yeah,
right? It can be a little challenging to try to get the kids to appreciate meditation, mindfulness, movement, spending time in nature if the parents don't, if the grandparents don't, right? But if we can get buy in from a whole entire family, then it makes it easier to spread the idea of self care into the community. So when we do the intergenerational stuff, it's about planting the seeds of the benefits of meditation and mindfulness, of moving the body, of spending time in nature. That's the goal of that. I think in order to make the impact that we really want to make, it starts with the kids. Because if we can get the kids young, 10 years from now, you know, these kids that are in elementary are going to be going to college and they're going to be loving, mindful, compassionate individuals. But the true transformation, we need everybody on board. So the kids, the parents, and the grandparents. And that's what we try to do through the intergenerational offerings that we have.
well, that's a perfect description of what does it mean to have sustainability, right? Sustainability in the body, I gotta get the whole thing working together and connected, and that's exactly what a human body is designed for. Procreation, gotta make more of them, and survival, right? Survival. And we can survive, yes, but what does it mean to thrive? And Andre, I think you're really talking about how can we thrive and begin thriving through knowledge, through education, and tools and techniques to thrive using the power that is within us as individual humans, but also to develop a way of living that is built around self care, not just self care so that you can be a good athlete or so that your nails can look good. Self care as a part of living, equally as important as learning mathematics or social studies. Self care. And then sharing that with your family and with your community. So, the energy field that we can begin to create, as Andre said, together can absolutely change the world one body at a time, one mind at a time, through meditation, through movement, and through that human connection of sharing our knowledge. Our knowledge is something that is so valuable. And when we have knowledge that we know is attached to helping us feel good, That is the most important knowledge that we can share with every human being on the planet. I want to thank you so much for joining me. I've loved this. And is it inner-city-citybliss.org? Is that the correct website?
It's inner-citybliss.org, or you can just go to Google and type in Inner City Bliss, and all of our sites and social media stuff will appear.
Beautiful. Well, I know that you also have a way for people to provide financial support for you. And I look forward to chatting with you, seeing how we can share some programming with the youth. We need some more NIA teachers in that.
No, I would love to talk to you about that. The training was wonderful. I learned a lot about I thought I was just going to dance, but I actually was integrating myself back into my body. So,
Yeah,
um, I'd love to talk to you about Nia and how, maybe I could speed up my process to being prepared to
absolutely.
teach.
Absolutely.
And
We'll do that. We'll make that work. Why? Because when you have knowledge, what's important, yes, share it. And that's what I'm going to do. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me and this wonderful conversation. You can also find information about me at debbierosas.com, Nia on Demand. You can get 2 weeks free on Instagram, Facebook at Nia Technique. And remember, this is such an important time for us to get into our bodies and get into confirmation, get into conversations about what does it mean to live well and to self-care. Thanks so much, everybody, and I'll see you next time.